too much noise today. I just need the road, the rain, and the hum of the engine.
Have you ever felt like there's a part of you don't really understand? Like, you're not sure who you really are anymore? I've been there too. Let me share something with you. Maybe it'll help you see things a little clearer. I used to believe that love was this magical thing, some invisible force that just hit you out of nowhere like lightning or fate or whatever else we like to blame when we lose control of ourselves. Maybe it's because of the movies or those old stories we grew up with, but I really thought love was supposed to feel like being swept off your feet. Like something outside of me would come and fill all the cracks I didn't want to see. I spent a lot of time chasing that feeling. The butterflies, the rush, the illusion that someone could walk into my life and make it all make sense. It sounds beautiful, right? But the truth is, it wasn't love I was looking for. It was escape. Escape from my loneliness, from the parts of me I didn't understand or didn't want to deal with. And as much as I wanted to believe otherwise, deep down, I think I knew that. It's weird how easy it is to confuse attraction with connection, need with love. There's this longing in us, this ache to be seen and held and chosen. And when someone finally comes along who seems to notice us, really notice us, it's like our whole nervous system lights up. We tell ourselves, this is it. This is the one. But often, it's not them we're responding to. It's what they reflect back at us. Or worse, what we project onto them. I started to realize that when I looked at the people I'd fallen for in the past, they had a pattern. It was almost eerie. Different faces, different names, but the same emotional imprint. I was drawn to people who were emotionally distant or broken in ways I thought I could fix. I thought I was being compassionate, maybe even noble. But I wasn't. I was trying to earn love by proving I could be enough. I thought if I loved hard enough, they'd finally stay, that they'd see me, that I'd matter. But love that's rooted in lack, it doesn't liberate you. It owns you. I remember this one relationship in particular. It started like a dream. He said all the right things. Looked at me like I was the only person in the room. He made me laugh, made me feel alive. And for a while, I convinced myself it was real. That this was the kind of love people wrote poems about. But slowly, I started to notice the little things. How I'd shrink myself to keep the peace. How I'd overthink every text, every silence. How I was always the one reaching out first. I started to feel like I was performing for approval, and the moment I stopped, the warmth disappeared. It took me a long time to admit that what I felt wasn't love. It was fear of abandonment dressed up in romance. And once that illusion started to crack, it all came rushing in. The loneliness, the shame, the questions I'd buried for years. Why do I keep choosing people who can't meet me? Why do I equate pain with passion? Why do I keep giving away my heart like it's something I have to earn the right to keep? That's when I started to realize the way I was loving wasn't about the other person. It was about me, about the story I was carrying about my worth, my needs, and my place in the world. And look, I don't say any of this with judgment. I think we all start somewhere. We're taught to believe that love is this grand rescue mission. Someone comes in, saves us from ourselves, and suddenly everything feels whole. But no one ever tells us that the real rescue has to come from within. That until we face the places we feel broken, we'll keep looking for someone else to glue us back together. Love isn't supposed to feel like you're losing yourself. It's not supposed to feel like guessing games and walking on eggshells and waiting to be chosen. If anything, it should bring you closer to who you are, not further away. But to see that, I had to let go of the fairy tale. I had to get really honest with myself. And let me tell you, that honesty hurt. It burned away all the stories I used to protect myself. But in the ashes, I found something more real than any fantasy I'd ever clung to. It's strange. Once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. You start noticing how much of what we call love is actually projection, or fear, or addiction to being needed. And it changes you. Not overnight and not without pain, but it does. And maybe, just maybe, that's where real love begins, not with someone else walking into your life, but with you finally deciding to walk into your own. There was a moment, quiet, unassuming, that shifted everything for me. I was sitting alone in my apartment after another argument that had left me drained and confused, and I caught myself saying, if only he could understand me. But then something snapped in my mind. This wasn't about him understanding me. It was about me not understanding why I kept ending up here, in relationships where I felt invisible unless I worked overtime to be seen. That's when I stumbled into Jung's idea of projection. I didn't fully grasp it at first, but the more I sat with it, the more it pierced through the fog. What if the person I thought I loved wasn't really them, but some part of me I was trying to find again? Some hidden piece I'd lost or rejected long ago. It was unsettling, realizing I wasn't falling in love with people, but with mirrors. Mirrors reflecting back the parts of me I hadn't claimed yet, like my vulnerability, my longing for safety, my need to be chosen without having to perform. All these pieces I had buried because somewhere along the line I've been taught they were too much or not enough or just plain wrong. And so I projected them outward, hoping someone else would carry them for me, would give them permission to exist. But that's the cruel trick of projection. You fall in love with someone because they awaken something inside you, and you think it's about them. But it's really about you. It always was. That recognition, as beautiful as it can feel, becomes dangerous if you're unconscious of it, because then you're not relating to the real person. You're relating to an image, a story you've written in your head, and when the real them inevitably fails to match the projection, the illusion shatters, and you feel betrayed. But really, you betrayed yourself by not seeing clearly. I started to revisit my past relationships through this lens, and it was humbling. The charismatic ones who made me feel seen, they were echoes of the confidence I hadn't yet owned. The ones who were emotionally distant, they mirrored how distant I was from my own heart. Even the ones who needed saving, they were me, desperately hoping someone would rescue the lost child inside. We're drawn to people not just because of who they are, but because of what they represent in our inner world. The unconscious recognizes something, a familiar pain, a buried longing, and calls it love. But it's not love. It's memory. It's unprocessed emotion. It's shadow. And here's the painful part. As long as I was unconscious of this dynamic, I was destined to repeat it. Over and over. Different bodies, same wound. And I kept thinking love was failing me, when in truth, I was the one setting myself up for heartbreak. I wasn't choosing for my wholeness. I was choosing for my wounds. It's a hard pill to swallow, seeing that. But it also gave me my power back. Because if I'm the one projecting, then I'm also the one who can stop, who can reclaim those lost parts, who can learn to love from a place of clarity, not compulsion. I began to ask different questions. Not why won't they love me, but what am I asking them to carry that I haven't accepted in myself? Not why do they always leave, but what part of me is still afraid to stay with myself? These questions weren't easy. They brought tears, memories, silence. But they also brought healing. There's this strange beauty in owning your projections. It's like finding fragments of your soul scattered across the faces of people you once thought were your destiny. You gather them up, one by one, and slowly you begin to remember who you are beneath all the stories. And in that remembering, something changes. You stop looking for someone to complete you. You start wanting someone to meet you, as you are, not as a savior, not as a fantasy, but as a fellow traveler. Someone who's done their own digging. Someone who won't run from the truth. Because once you've met your shadow, you can finally recognize what real love feels like. Grounding, honest, human. It doesn't rush in like a firestorm. It arrives gently, like a sunrise. And it doesn't dazzle you with illusion. It meets you in reality. It says, I see you, and it means it. But that kind of love only finds you once you've stopped projecting and started reclaiming. And that's a process. One that takes time and tenderness and hell a lot of courage. But it's worth it. You know what really shook me? Realizing how often I confused intensity with intimacy. That electric feeling, the emotional roller coaster, the dramatic highs and lows. I used to think that meant something was real that it was deep. But now I see it for what it was: emotional dependency dressed up in romantic language. I didn't want to admit it. Who does? Who wants to admit that the fire they thought was love was really just their nervous system reacting to fear, uncertainty, and unmet childhood needs? But that's the truth I had to face. And once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. There's a kind of love that looks like connection, but feels like survival, where you start out feeling chosen, and then slowly become afraid to be anything but what the other person wants you to be. Where silence feels threatening, where affection becomes currency, and where every disagreement feels like a potential goodbye. That's not love. That's the residue of old wounds. I can still feel it sometimes, that panic rising in my chest when I sense someone pulling away. It's a familiar sensation, like being a kid again and thinking that if I don't act just right, I'll be abandoned. So I overcompensate. I apologize for things I didn't do. I become hyper-aware of their moods, their silence, their shifting energy. And I call it caring. But deep down, it's fear. Fear of being left. Fear of not being enough. I started calling this out in myself, gently, without judgment. I noticed when I felt the urge to reach out, not because I wanted to share something, but because I was afraid of being forgotten. I catch myself thinking, if I say this, maybe they'll come closer, and instead ask, what would I say if I weren't afraid? Emotional dependency is subtle. It doesn't always look desperate. Sometimes it looks like people-pleasing. Sometimes it looks like compromise. Sometimes it even looks like love. But underneath, there's a constant anxiety, a need to be validated, to be seen, to be saved. I had to face the fact that I wasn't showing up in relationships as a whole person. I was showing up as a need, a wound, a hope that someone else could do for me what I hadn't yet learned to do for myself. And it's not that I didn't love them. I did, in the way I was capable of at the time. But I also needed them. Too much. I needed their approval to feel okay. I needed their presence to feel secure. I needed their attention to feel real. That's a heavy burden to place on another human being. And sooner or later, it breaks the connection. Because real love can't grow in a space where one person is shrinking themselves just to be held. The irony is I kept looking for someone who would never leave, someone stable, consistent, unshakable. But I wasn't offering that to myself. I was abandoning myself the moment someone didn't meet my needs. I didn't know how to hold space for my own discomfort, so I kept reaching outward. Healing that pattern has been messy. It's not like I flipped a switch and suddenly became secure. But I started small. I began sitting with my discomfort instead of trying to soothe it with a text or a call. I reminded myself that distance doesn't always mean rejection, that silence isn't always abandonment, that I can survive moments of emotional uncertainty without collapsing into fear. And slowly, things started to shift. I began to feel more grounded, not because the people around me changed, but because I did. I stopped looking at relationships as lifelines and started seeing them as mirrors. If someone pulled away, it didn't mean I was unlovable. If someone didn't respond how I wanted, it didn't mean I was forgotten. It just meant they were human. And so was I. That understanding changed everything. I began to crave a different kind of connection, one built on presence, not performance. One where both people could breathe. Where love wasn't about fixing or saving or clinging, but about witnessing and being witnessed. Not for the masks we wear, but for the truth we carry beneath them. And let me tell you, that kind of love is quieter, but so much deeper. It doesn't consume you. It steadies you. But you can't get there by skipping the hard part. You have to face the parts of you that confuse pain for passion and need for love. You have to look honestly at where you abandon yourself. And you have to choose, again and again, to stay with you. Because until you learn to hold yourself, you'll keep searching for someone else to do it for you. And that's not love. That's fear in disguise. It's strange, isn't it? How the kind of love we all say we want, calm, steady, unconditional, is often the kind that scares us the most. I used to say I wanted peace, but when someone offered it to me, I mistook it for boredom. I craved intensity, the high of being wanted, the rush of dramatic reunions after painful distance. I confused chaos with depth, but eventually that chaos just wore me down. There came a point where I had to ask myself, what if love doesn't have to hurt? What if I don't need to prove my worth to be held? What if being loved isn't about filling a hole, but about sharing what's already full? It was a radical thought that maybe I wasn't supposed to chase love or earn it or manipulate the world around me just to feel worthy of it. Maybe the only real love is the kind that flows from a place of inner abundance. Not need, not a void, but a quiet knowing I am enough. I'm whole. And because of that, I can give love without fear of losing myself in the process. That idea didn't come easy. I resisted it at first. I'd spent so many years believing that love meant sacrifice, that to be loved, I had to shrink, contort, become what the other person needed. I thought that was noble, but now I see it was just self-abandonment wearing a nice dress. The turning point came when I finally got tired of the cycle. Tired of the highs and lows. Tired of feeling like love was something I had to chase down and beg to stay. I wanted something different, something softer, something real. And that started with me, with sitting alone and learning to enjoy my own company, with making peace with the parts of me I'd labeled unlovable, the messiness, the fear, the quiet ache for something more. I stopped trying to fix myself and started trying to understand myself. That's when I realized the kind of love I wanted from others was the kind I hadn't yet learned to give myself. So I began to show up differently, not just in relationships, but in how I treated myself on a random Tuesday morning. I let myself rest without guilt. I said no without apology. I stopped explaining my worth to people who didn't value it. And slowly, that inner shift began to reflect outward. I no longer saw people as potential saviors or threats. I stopped assigning them the job of completing me. And in that release, something beautiful happened. I felt free. Free to love without control. Free to walk away from what drained me. Free to be curious instead of anxious. Love, I realized, is not about possession. It's not about someone making up for what you think you lack. It's about two whole people choosing every day to meet each other with openness and care. That kind of love doesn't come from needing someone. It comes from wanting to share with them. And that distinction, it changes everything. Because when you no longer need someone to complete you, you don't tolerate crumbs. You don't beg for attention or twist yourself to be liked. You show up as you are, open, honest, and grounded, and you invite others to do the same. And if they can't, you let them go. Not from bitterness, but from clarity. You know what you're worth now. And it's not measured by how much you're willing to suffer to be loved. It's funny. All those years I spent searching for the perfect relationship, only to realize that the most important relationship was the one I had with myself. When that changed, everything else did too. So if you're in that place right now, feeling like love is always out of reach, like you're too much or not enough, I just want to say this. You are not broken. You are not unlovable. You're just learning to return to yourself. And that's the most powerful kind of love there is. Because once you build your life on wholeness, you stop chasing what was never real. And instead, you start attracting what was always meant for you. It took me a long time to understand what self-acceptance really meant. Not the Instagram version with affirmations and bubble baths. Though sure, those things can help. I mean the gritty, honest version. The kind where you sit with yourself when you feel unworthy, and instead of trying to fix it or run from it, you just say, yeah, this is part of me too. That kind of acceptance, it's not easy. It's raw. It asks you to look directly at the parts of yourself you were taught to hide, the insecurities, the awkwardness, the unmet needs, and offer them the same compassion you so easily extend to others. It's choosing to stop fighting your own reflection. I remember one night, lying in bed, feeling that familiar heaviness in my chest. No drama had happened. No one had left. But I felt empty, like something was missing. And for the first time, I didn't grab my phone. I didn't try to distract myself. I just let myself feel it. And somewhere in that silence, I whispered to myself, I'm still here. That small phrase changed me. Because it was true. Even when I didn't feel lovable or successful or interesting, I was still here. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. You see, I had spent so much of my life outsourcing my sense of worth, waiting for someone to pick me, to validate me, to reflect back that I mattered. But no amount of love from another person can ever fill the void that comes from abandoning yourself. And that's what I had been doing. Every time I silenced my needs to keep someone close. Every time I laughed at something that hurt me just to avoid conflict. Every time I twisted myself into a version I thought would be more lovable. I was walking away from myself. No wonder I felt empty. So I started practicing staying. Staying with myself when I felt lonely. Staying with myself when shame crept in. Staying with myself when I was tempted to seek approval. It wasn't heroic. It was quiet, slow, and often uncomfortable. But it was real. And gradually, I began to soften, to listen, to treat myself not as a problem to solve, but as someone worthy of tenderness. That's when I began to see how all the love I had craved from others, the care, the attention, the safety, had to start with me. Because if I didn't believe I deserved those things, even when someone offered them, I'd find ways to push them away. Ide sabotaja, ide shrink. I questioned whether they were being sincere. But when you start to love yourself, not because you've achieved something or become better, but simply because you've decided you're worthy of your own kindness, that's when things begin to change. You stop begging for scraps of attention. You stop tolerating relationships that drain you. You stop proving, and you start living. There's this metaphor I love. The moon doesn't beg to be seen. It just shines. Whether someone notices or not, it's still full, still glowing, still whole. That became my practice. Being like the moon. Not loud or desperate, but present. Gentle. Enough. It's funny. People started responding to me differently. Not because I became more attractive or interesting, but because I wasn't leaking that desperate energy anymore. I wasn't asking to be completed. I was showing up whole. And wholeness. It's magnetic. Not because it screams, but because it doesn't need to. And I don't say this like I've arrived or figured it all out. I still have moments where I doubt, where old stories creep in. But now I catch them. I meet them. And I stay. I stay with myself. Because at the end of the day, love isn't something you find out there. It's something you return to in here. And once you've done that, once you've met yourself in the dark and chosen not to run, no relationship will ever feel the same. Because you're no longer chasing someone to fill the silence. You've made peace with it. And from that peace, real connection can finally grow. You know what's wild? When you finally start showing up as your whole self. Not just the polished version you think others will like, but the real, messy, honest version. The way you experience love completely transforms. It's not about being chosen anymore. It's about choosing. About meeting another person not from hunger or fear, but from fullness. From clarity. From a place where you know who you are, and you're not trying to be anything else just to be loved. That kind of connection is rare. Not because people aren't capable of it, but because most of us are still healing, still chasing, still afraid. And I get it, I've been there. But when two people come together from a place of wholeness, it feels different. It feels safe, spacious, like breathing fresh air after years of holding your breath. It's not about completing each other. That old myth can die. Honestly, it's about witnessing each other, standing side by side as equals. Not trying to fix or rescue or mold one another, but saying, I see you, and I'm here, not because I need something from you, but because being with you deepens what I already carry inside. That's the magic. I remember the first time I experienced even a glimpse of that. It was subtle. There were no fireworks, no overwhelming infatuation. Just this quiet calm between us. We could sit in silence without needing to fill it. We could disagree without fear of the whole thing crumbling. And I didn't feel like I had to earn his love. I could just exist. That alone was revolutionary. There's something beautiful about knowing you can bring your whole self to the table. Your thoughts, your quirks, your flaws, and not feel like any of it is too much. That you don't have to shrink or edit yourself to be accepted. That you don't have to hustle for someone's love because you already know you're worthy of it. When love is rooted in wholeness, there's no space for games. No need for manipulation. No obsession with whether they've texted back or how much they care. Because the foundation is trust. Not just in them, but in yourself. You trust that you'll be okay whether they stay or not. You trust that love will never require you to abandon yourself again. It's this soft, steady presence. You can show up tired or anxious or unsure, and they don't flinch. They don't try to fix you. They just hold space. And you do the same for them. Not because it's easy, but because you've both done the work. You've both sat with your shadows and decided not to let fear run the show. That doesn't mean it's perfect. It just means it's real. And real love, it grows in the soil of acceptance, of presence, of choice. You start to realize that loving someone isn't about possessing them or needing them to meet every emotional need. It's about creating a space where both people feel free to be themselves, fully, unapologetically. A space where joy can flourish, where pain can be held, and where growth isn't something that threatens the connection but strengthens it. That kind of love doesn't trap you. It expands you. It makes you braver, softer, more open. It doesn't demand that you give yourself away. It invites you to become more of who you already are. I think we've been so conditioned to think that love has to be dramatic to be real. But sometimes the deepest love is quiet. It's in the mundane, the shared breakfasts, the gentle check-ins, the knowing glance across a room. It's in the way they remember something small you said weeks ago. It's in the way they listen, really listen, when your voice trembles. And it's not just about romance. This kind of sacred union can show up in friendships, too. In anyone who meets you with presence, who doesn't try to change you, who reflects back your wholeness instead of exploiting your wounds. That's the kind of connection I want now. The kind that makes both of us more ourselves. The kind that grows slowly, steadily, without force. The kind that feels like home, not because it's familiar in a painful way, but because it's safe in a way you didn't know was possible. And here's the truth. You don't find the kind of love by searching outside yourself. You create the conditions for it by becoming it. By loving yourself so deeply, so patiently, that you stop settling for anything less. Only then can two whole hearts meet, not to complete each other, but to walk together side by side through whatever life brings. It's hard to explain just how loud the world can be when it comes to love. Everywhere you look, there's some message telling you what it's supposed to look like. The movies say it should be all-consuming. Social media says it should be picture perfect. And somewhere along the way, we start believing that struggle and suffering are just part of the deal. But the truth? Love doesn't need to hurt to be real. It doesn't have to be dramatic to be deep. It took me years to unlearn that, to stop romanticizing pain, to stop mistaking emotional chaos for connection. I used to think that love was proven in how much I was willing to sacrifice, how many times I could forgive, how far I could stretch, how long I could hold on. But now I know real love doesn't require you to abandon yourself. That realization was a kind of awakening, like coming up for air after being underwater for too long. I started to look at everything differently, my past relationships, the stories I'd been fed, the narratives I'd absorbed without question. I saw how often we're taught to chase love instead of grow it, to earn it instead of embody it. But love isn't a transaction. It's not something you barter for with your silence or your suffering. It's not about convincing someone to choose you or waiting for them to change. Love, real love, is a space. A safe, soft place where two people can be their whole, flawed, radiant selves. And that space? It begins inside you. We're so quick to blame others when relationships fall apart. But the most profound shift happened when I turned the mirror toward myself. I started asking, where do I still abandon my own heart? Where do I silence my voice? Where do I settle for less because I'm afraid of being alone? Those questions didn't break me. They freed me. Because the moment I began to take responsibility for my own wholeness, I stopped accepting half-loves. I stopped entertaining relationships built on potential instead of presence. I stopped giving away parts of myself just to feel wanted. And in that stillness, without the noise, the chasing, the old stories, I found something sacred. Peace. Not the kind of peace that comes from someone else finally treating you right, but the kind that comes when you treat yourself with the love and respect you've always deserved. The kind that makes you unshakable, not because you're invulnerable, but because you're rooted. From that place, love becomes something entirely different. It's not about being saved or saving someone else. It's about walking together side by side with eyes wide open. It's about growing, stumbling, healing, and holding space, not just for each other, but for the parts of ourselves we're still learning to embrace. And maybe that's the kind of love this world needs more of. Not the flashy kind, not the desperate kind, but the quiet, steady kind that creates a home, not just with another person, but within ourselves. So if you're still searching, still healing, still wondering if you're too much or not enough, I want you to know this. You are not broken. You are becoming. And the more you come home to yourself, the more you'll see that the love you've always been searching for has been inside you all along. If this felt meaningful to you, it might mean something to someone else too. So hit like, leave a comment, or subscribe. That's how YouTube knows to share it with others. Maybe together, we can help someone see things a little differently.